Welcome back to the last part in our series on industrialization. In the last lesson, you learned about how immigration impacted the United States in both positive and negative ways. America became a melting pot of cultures, ideas, and people, and it was seen as a land of opportunity. However, during this time period, we saw overcrowding of cities and an increase in nationalism that can be attributed to discrimination against immigrants. For various reasons, living and working conditions were not great in newly industrialized cities. Today, we are going to continue exploring that and take a look at how a few reformers began to make a difference early on. So as you're watching, consider this question. Who were the early reformers of industrialization, and why were they needed in the first place? I also want you to reflect on the ways in which the United States still needed to make change as we reach the end of this unit. First, as we've previously discussed, there were tons of new employment opportunities in the cities due to the growth of factories at an unprecedented rate. Some people came from more rural parts of the United States, getting away from agriculture, but most of the workforce consisted of immigrants coming from other countries looking for work and a fresh start. People were moving into urban centers by the thousands, and there just wasn't enough housing to support all of these people. Another contributing factor was the fact that most workers were a part of the working poor and could not afford decent housing. Very quickly, single-family homes became multi-family apartments and were known as tenements. Many tenements were located in ghettos, neighborhoods of poor, predominantly immigrant or minority families with very unhealthy, unsanitary living conditions. In addition to the less than ideal living conditions, immigrants had to deal with the corruption of their government. In New York City, for example, Tammany Hall was the most powerful political machine influencing the politics of the time. In order to stay in power, these politicians bribed poor and immigrant voters for their votes in exchange for necessities as gifts. Take a moment to look at what's going on in this political cartoon. The sign at the top of the room says rewards, fat offices, diamonds, palaces, and money for those that count out the anti-Tammany tickets. No detections as we have the law in our hands. Boss, meaning Boss Tweed. And then $100 reward for the detection of the illegal anti-Tammany voting. State's prison offense. Boss. Both of these signs refer to the encouraged practice of preventing people from voting against the Tammany ticket and not counting votes for anti-Tammany candidates. They also clearly had the police in their pocket. What else do you notice? To try and help alleviate some of the problems faced by immigrants in these cities, settlement houses were developed. They were used in the late 1800s and early 1900s in large cities like New York and Chicago. They were aimed at poor, recently immigrated women and children and gave them a place to live close to their work for a price they could afford. In addition to simply housing people, settlement houses often provided a variety of necessary resources. One such reformer was Jane Addams. Addams founded one of the most famous settlement houses in America called Hull House. Located in Chicago, Illinois, and opened in 1889, the Hull House opened to recently immigrated Europeans. In her lifetime, Addams helped America focus on issues concerning women, including public health and world peace. Another reformer with a slightly different approach was Jacob Riis. Riis was a photographer who chose to use his art to make the public aware of how the poorest in our country were being forced to live. He photographed people in the largest cities for his collection, How the Other Half Lives. His work shed an important light on what life was like in the ghettos and forced people to take notice. These changes were just the beginning. Over the years, many more reforms would come to fruition. But Jane Addams and Jacob Riis were some of the first. Take a moment to reflect on the essential question today and review your notes.